He was brought in, Going entering at the same time. Mr. Murray Posh was a tall, fat young man, and was evidently of a very nervous disposition, as he subsequently confessed he would never go in a hansom cab. On being introduced, Going, with his usual want of tact, said, "Any relation to Posh's 3-shilling hats?" Mr. Posh replied, "Yes, but please understand I don't try on hats myself. I take no active part in the business." Murray Posh evidently knew Daisy Mutler very intimately from the way he was talking of her, and Frank said to Lupin once, laughingly, "If you don't look out, Posh will cut you out." When they'd all gone, I referred to this flippant conversation, and Lupin said, sarcastically, "A man who would be jealous of an elephant like Murray Posh could only have a contempt for himself. I know Daisy. She would wait 10 years for me, as I said before. In fact, if necessary, she would wait 20 years for me." February the 18th. Carrie has several times recently called attention to the thinness of my hair at the top of my head, and recommended me to get it seen to. I was this morning trying to look at it by the aid of a small hand glass, when somehow my elbow caught against the edge of a chest of drawers and knocked the glass out of my hand and smashed it. Carrie said, "Mark my words, Charles, some misfortune is about to happen." I said, "Nonsense, dear." In the evening, Lupin arrived home early and seemed a little agitated. I said, "What's up, my boy?" He hesitated a good deal and then said, "You know those parachica chlorates I advised you to invest £20 in?" I replied, "Yes. They're all right, I trust?" He replied, "Well, no. To the surprise of everybody, they've utterly collapsed." My breath was so completely taken away, I could say nothing. Carrie looked at me and said, "What did I tell you?" Lupin, after a while, said, "However, you're specially fortunate. I received an early tip and sold out yours immediately, and was fortunate to get £2 for them. So you get something after all." I gave a sigh of relief. I said I was not so sanguine as to suppose, as you predicted, that I should get 6 or 8 times the amount of my investment. Still, a profit of £2 is a good percentage for such a short time. Lupin said quite irritably, "You don't understand. I sold your £20 shares for £2. You therefore lost £18 on the transaction, whereby Cummings and Going will lose the whole of theirs." February the 19th. In the evening, Lupin was just on the point of going out to avoid a collision with Going and Cummings, when the former entered the room without knocking, but with his usual trick of saying, "May I come in?" He entered, and to the surprise of Lupin and myself, seemed to be in the very best of spirits. Neither Lupin nor I broached the subject to him, but he did so of his own accord. He said, "I say, those parachica chlorates have got an awful smash. You're a nice one, Master Lupin. How much did you lose?" Lupin, to my utter astonishment, said, "Oh, I had nothing in them. There was some informality in my application. I forgot to enclose the cheque or something, and I didn't get any. The Gov loses £18. Before I could reply, Going said, "Well, I lose nothing, fortunately. From what I heard, I did not quite believe in them, so I persuaded Cummings to take my £15 worth, as he had more faith in them than I had." Lupin burst out laughing, and in the most unseemly manner said, "Alas, poor Cummings, he'd lose £35. At that moment there was a ring at the bell. Lupin said, "I don't want to meet Cummings." If he had gone out of the door, he would have met him in the passage. So as quickly as possible, Lupin opened the parlour window and got out. Going jumped up suddenly, exclaiming, "I don't want to see him either," and before I could say a word, he'd followed Lupin out of the window. February the 20th. The first thing that caught my eye on opening the Standard was, "Great failure of stock and share dealers. Mr. Job Cleanends absconded." I handed it to Carrie, and she replied, "Oh, perhaps it's for Lupin's good. I never did think it a suitable situation for him. Lupin came down to breakfast, and seeing he looked painfully distressed, I said, "We know the news, dear boy, and feel very sorry for you." Lupin said, "How did you know? Who told you?" I handed him the Standard. He threw the paper down and said, "Oh, I don't care a button for that. I expected that, but I did not expect this." He then read a letter from Frank Mutlar, announcing in a cool manner that Daisy Mutlar is to be married next month to Murray Posh. I exclaimed, "Murray Posh? Is not that the very man Frank had the impudence to bring here last Tuesday week?" Lupin said, "Yes, the Posh's 3-shilling hat chap." We all then ate our breakfast in dead silence. When Lupin rose to go, I noticed a malicious smile creep over his face. I asked him what it meant. He replied, "Oh, only a little consolation. Still, it is a consolation. I've just remembered that by my advice, Mr. Murray Posh has invested £600 in parachica chlorates." March the 20th. Today being the day on which Daisy Mutlar and Mr. Murray Posh are to be married, Lupin has gone with a friend to spend the day at Gravesend. Lupin has been much cut up over the affair, although he declares that he's glad it is off. I wish he would not go to so many music halls, but one dare not say anything to him about it. At the present moment, he irritates me by singing all over the house some nonsense about "What's the matter with Gladstone? He's all right. What's the matter with Lupin? He's all right." I don't think either of them is. March the 21st. Today, one of the happiest days of my life. My great dream of the last few weeks, in fact of many years, has been realized. This morning came a letter from Mr. Perkup, asking me to take Lupin down to the office with me. I went to Lupin's room. Poor fellow, he seemed very pale, and said he had a bad headache. He had come back yesterday from Gravesend, where he spent part of the day in a small boat on the water, having been mad enough to neglect to take his overcoat with him. I showed him Mr. Perkup's letter, and he got up as quickly as possible. I begged of him not to put on his fast-coloured clothes and ties, but to dress in something black or quiet-looking. Carrie was all of a tremble when she read the letter, and all she could keep on saying was, "Oh, I do hope it'll be all right." For myself, I could scarcely eat any breakfast. Lupin came down, dressed quietly, and looking like a perfect gentleman, except that his face was rather yellow. Carrie, by way of encouragement, said, "You do look nice, Lupin." Lupin replied, "Yes, it's a good make-up, isn't it? A regular, downright respectable, funereal, first-class city firm junior clerk." And he laughed, rather ironically. It seemed hours before we reached the office. Mr. Perkup sent for Lupin, who was with him nearly an hour. He returned, as I thought, crestfallen in appearance. I said, "Well, Lupin, how about Mr. Perkup?" Lupin commenced his song. "What's the matter with Perkup? He's all right." I felt instinctively my boy was engaged. I went to Mr. Perkup, but I could not speak. He said, "Well, Mr. Pooter, what is it?" I must have looked a fool, for all I could say was, "Mr. Perkup, you are a good man." He looked at me for a moment and said, "No, Mr. Pooter, you are the good man, and we'll see if we cannot get your son to follow such an excellent example." I said, "Mr. Perkup, may I go home? I cannot work any more today." My good master shook my hand warmly as he nodded his head. It was as much as I could do to prevent myself from crying in the bus. In fact, I should have done so, had my thoughts not been interrupted by Lupin, who was having a quarrel with a fat man in the bus, whom he accused of taking up too much room.